So today we're going to make a familiar for your table. A little bit of bling to store your dice in. It's an Eyeaboxical familiar. It always keeps an eye on those dice, those little determiners of fate for you. And it looks like this. Inside you will see there is plenty of room for dice, and it also has a little bit of a fleshy interior. Ooh, kind of creepy. So yeah, we'll be building this out of a box that I bought at Michael's. And if I find a link to it that you can get it online from, I will also put that into the description for the video. This is a little bit of an involved build, but it is one of those things that you build it once and you use it forever. So that's the kind of thing I love. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off that extra edge off of the cover and of the box itself, so it'll be nice and flush with the rest of the box. I did this using a coping saw. You could also use a bandsaw. You could even sand it off. It would take you a little while, but you could do that. You could also file it off. But the goal basically is to have that thin edge on the top and the bottom of the box to be flush with the sides of the box. And you'll notice here I also painted it. I had the original intention of making this sort of like a brown leather box, and I was like, let's make it more fun, and I went the Eyeaboxical way. So this primer here was a little unnecessary. And we're going to start with taking some masking tape and covering the top of the box. This is to make sure that when we start texturizing the outside, that the glue from that and the toilet paper tissue doesn't get on top of this box. And then we're going to cut off that masking tape around the edge using our utility knife. And then we're going to cut off the inside bits of the masking tape too. We're putting the masking tape on the top of the box here to make sure that there's still that smooth top to it, so when you put the cover back on, it'll still marry up nicely. If you don't do this, it's a real pain to get all of the texturing material off later on. And I also put masking tape on the bottom of the box. I didn't actually video that, but you just do it the same way. I just ended up covering the entire bottom of the box. Here I'm covering the inside lip of the lid, because again, I want to keep that clean and smooth so that it marries up nicely with the box. And I'm just cutting off the excess here. I'm using a little piece of wood underneath to give me a little bit more of something to cut on. And here I'm using a piece of my trusty Dollar Tree foam board and cutting out a round shape to make the ball of the eye. And luckily it's nice and white, so it works out really well. And here I'm just using a piece of sandpaper to round out that piece of foam so it looks a little bit more like a dome shape. I'm also smoothing out the outside edges. And I'm kind of using this sort of like circular motion on the sandpaper. That seemed to work pretty well and keep an even round kind of edge going. I just need a little bit more. Do this for a little while. And pretty soon you'll see that it has this dome shape, perfect for the eye. That looks pretty good. A little test fit. Yep, there you go. And then we just hot glue our glass eye onto the eyeball. Here I'm taking some sewing thread and I'm splitting out the sewing thread with a needle into little individual parts because I wanted to try to actually simulate veins in the eyeball. I'm showing you this even though you can't see it in the final model. I realized what I did wrong, but I think this is a kind of a cool idea. It's not original. I think I saw this on a wax museum documentary, but I like the idea and I'm going to try it again. It didn't work out this time because I did something silly, but I figured I'd also show you my mistakes because those can be useful to learn from too. But yeah, this is kind of a cool technique and I think it could work out really well if I just refine my way of doing it a little bit. And so here I'm going to put the eye on the top lid of the box. And I realized that we're going to be using tissue paper, toilet tissue, and then some glue and water to kind of make this look like it's got a fleshy top. But I realized let me use some hot glue to kind of build it up first because otherwise it's going to take forever for that tissue paper to dry. So I added some first. And here I'm using one of my favorite products. This is realistic water. This stuff is amazing. To give the eyeball itself a wet look. And after that's dry completely, I put masking tape over it. And here was my mistake. I think what happened was when I put this masking tape on, the little ends of the sewing thread that weren't glued down by the realistic water got stuck on the bottom of the masking tape. So when I pulled the masking tape up later, it just pulled the veins with it, unfortunately. Just make sure that this is on there and it's nice and mashed down and has a good seal. We're going to use this to protect the eyeball while we put our texture on top of it. The texture being like the eyelid and the surrounding flesh. Here's the fun, dirty part. This is toilet tissue, and that's dipped in a mixture, a 50-50 mixture of PVA glue and water, and it's just soaked. And we're just going to use this sort of as a sculpting compound. And here I'm sort of sculpting out a thicker ridge on the top and the bottom of the eye, just to kind of build it out a little bit. And this is actually a really, obviously, very inexpensive way to make some great texture and to have a material that you can kind of sculpt with. And I'm going to put this all the way around, and once I have this kind of built up, I'm going to take a couple of toilet sheets, squares, fold it over to make the top eyelid and the bottom eyelid. And here's my folded over square, kind of lay that on there. And I lay it on dry, and then I use a brush to put on the 50-50 mixture of PVA glue and water. And as you do that, it just sort of soaks into the rest. And don't worry about the pattern on the toilet tissue there, it'll go away. So I anchor it down with the water glue mixture. And then once it's in place, I take a toothpick, which I had trimmed off the sharp end of, to move the eyelid up so it's like an open eye. And then I started using the back of this paintbrush to sort of try to sculpt out the shape of the eyeball inside sort of like a socket, and also to give some texture to the surrounding skin. And then I did the same thing for the bottom eyelid, and then I anchored it in place with the PVA and water mix. And I used my little dull end of the toothpick to adjust the position of that lid too. And it sort of naturally rolls over the toilet paper, so it kind of gets an edge on it that looks like an eyelid, which is pretty cool. And then I took some time to add some detail to the fleshy bits above and below the eyelid. And I just did this kind of by poking around with my paintbrush and my toothpick until it sort of started looking interesting. And then to finish it off, I took a generous amount of the glue water mixture around the edges to make sure that the toilet paper adheres to the sides of the lid. And I put it on top of the cover of a jar just to have it off the surface, so the toilet paper can hang down on the sides of the lid, so they'll hopefully stick to the sides of the lid better. And then just put that aside to dry. Then it was time to do the sides of the box, and this is just one long sheet of toilet paper. I kind of hold it in place, and then I douse it in the glue water mixture. This is pretty straightforward and easy. And then once I've gotten this all nice and wet on there and sticking onto the sides, I tear off the extra bits, and I use another lid here to put it on while it dries, so the little bits on the bottom can hang down straight. And I'm just sort of finishing it up here and getting it nice and moist. The more glue water mixture you have on there, the better. It'll just take longer to dry, but it'll stick better. And then I just use my paintbrush to kind of even it out a little bit. You can also see here in certain spots, you can see the masking tape I put on the bottom of the box prior to this. That's going to make it a lot easier once this is dry to get everything off. Then it was time to actually do the inside of the box, and this sort of looks like a fleshy cavity, so I wanted to sort of make it less squared around the outside edge, so I added some toilet paper on the bottom to sort of round out the bottom of the box. By the way, this is all kind of messy. You can see I'm wearing gloves. You can do it without gloves, but it is nice to have gloves on because it is kind of messy and sticky. Only thing with the gloves is that they kind of get sticky too, so this is a little bit finicky. The toilet paper starts sticking to your gloves and it gets kind of messy, but just be patient and make sure you do this on a surface where you don't mind getting glue on. If you notice here, I'm using a tray with tinfoil in it, so I can just pull out the tinfoil afterwards and toss that out, and it's easy cleanup. And then it was time to do the sides. I kind of did it with little pieces of toilet paper that I kind of put in there temporarily and then dabbed in with paintbrush and glue and water mixture. And I did this all around the edges. This is actually a little bit more time consuming than I thought it would be, but it came out pretty good. You just got to be patient with it. You just got to use a lot of the glue water mixture and make sure it's nice and wet and sticks on there real good. And don't worry if it's a little haphazard and it's got lumps and stuff. It's supposed to look a little meaty, so it's okay if it looks uneven and stuff. Even it's actually better if it does look a little uneven. You just got to make sure that the toilet paper that's on the sides of the box goes over the top of the box. It's past the edge, because what we're going to do is once this is dry, we're going to trim that off so it has a nice clean edge and makes room for the box lid too. And again, don't be stingy with the glue water mixture. So once that's totally dry, we're going to rough trim off everything with a pair of scissors here. And I'm going to use a razor blade. You could use a utility knife. I like using a razor blade because I can get flush with the top of the lid and the top of the box. Just be real careful when you use it. You'll notice when I'm using my blade here, I'm very aware of where the blade will go if my hand slips. In this case, it'll go down, so I won't hit my hand. So just be real careful with this. You can also hold the blade in the reverse, so you're pushing away from yourself. I do that at times as well. It's just sort of kind of depends on what I'm trying to do. And here I'm just trying to get all this toilet paper flush with the inside edge of the lid here. And you'll notice when you're doing this on the edge, some of the toilet paper won't stick. And we'll just fix that up with a layer of glue directly on that edge. And we'll massage it in with our fingers in between the toilet paper and the edge of the lid. And that'll seal it on there real well. And then just wipe away the excess. This will make it a lot easier later. And we'll put that aside to dry, and then we'll start on the box itself. Again, we're going to trim off the excess. You'll notice here, it's hard to tell from the video, but in these shots, my hand, my thumb in particular, is below the top of the box. So if my blade slips, I don't cut my hand. You're going to want to do the same thing. You're going to want to be real careful with that. Here I'm working on the bottom. On the bottom it was just easier to take the masking tape off first because there wasn't a lot of overhang. And it comes off relatively easy. And we just use our razor blade again. And here you'll see I'm doing it in the opposite direction. I'm pushing it away from me. Again, I'm doing it in a way that my hand is below the plane of the box. So if my blade slips, I won't hit my hand. And then it's time to take the masking tape off the top. This is a little bit finicky. It's going to take a little time. And once that's off, I'm going to clean up that edge a little bit more and see if we can't get some of that excess toilet paper off. And now it's time to cut a little bit of a lip on the inside of the box. And this is to make room for the lid. The lid actually goes inside the box here, and it's a pretty tight fit. So you got to make sure that there's nothing there other than just the paint that we're going to paint with later. So we're going to just take off a sliver of the top, and it comes off pretty easily. And again, here my hand is below the plane of the top of the box, my left hand. So if my blade does slip, I won't hit my hand. So always be careful with that. And once you've got a nice score around the outside edge, that's not too bad to peel it off. Here I'm just testing the fit to make sure that I got that lip deep enough. Yep, and it seems to work pretty well. So now we're going to seal the top of that toilet paper texture on the outside and on the inside of the box. And you can just do this with your hands. You can wear gloves for this too, so you don't get glue on your hands. But honestly, I feel like I do a better job if I don't wear the gloves. There is something to be said for having that tactile connection with your work. You can kind of tell when you're getting it into the grooves right, and you can massage it better and manipulate the glue better, I think. And then you just wipe away the excess on the inside and the outside. And then we'll do the same thing on the bottom. And again, we'll wipe away the excess. It's all about getting it into the groove between the toilet paper and the box itself. So when you wipe away the excess, you're not making it less strong. It's just getting rid of any bulges that would be there after it dries. So then set this aside to dry for a good long time. And once it's totally dry, we're going to start painting. And I started with this bright red, which to me looked more like salmon by the time I got it on there. So I quickly changed to holiday red, which is a deeper red, and I kind of went over my work and made it the more red color, which I'm happy about. And you're going to want to make sure you get all the little nooks and crannies inside the box, and also the top of the box is going to be red as well. Don't worry if it goes on the outside of your box, because we're going to fix that when we do this purple layer. So yeah, this is just straight purple. This is the base coat for the box itself. And make sure you get it into all those little nooks and crannies, because there's going to be a lot of them. And I did end up mounting my box on one of my miniature painting stands to make it a lot easier to do the subsequent steps like painting the sides. And I'm really glad I did. It made it a lot easier to work with. And just paint the entire outside in purple, just like the top lid. Then I painted the lid in the same red that I did the inside of the box with. You'll notice I'm sort of kind of pushing down with a brush because I'm trying to avoid brush strokes. And I'm also trying to add a little texture to this lid because it's got a wood grain to it, and I'm trying to hide that wood grain. Once that's completely dry, it's time to dry brush on some pink. Just dry brush it on, and you can do as much or as little as you like. I kind of like it to be, by the time it's done, about a 50-50 mix of pink that you see and then the red underneath. And this really sells it as being sort of a fleshy, sinewy kind of an interior. And you're going to do this on all the red surfaces. And you're going to do it on the top of the box too. And here I'm just brushing around the top of the lid. I'm kind of trying to be a little haphazard with it because I want to make sure it looks random and not like brush strokes. And then it's time to do the inside of the lid. Now the inside of the lid I'm going to do with this cruddy old brush I have, and the cruddier the better. Like if it's really frayed out like that, it's perfect. Since there's no texture on this box other than the wood grain, I'm just going to stab it onto the box with a little bit of paint on there to give it this stippled look. And again, this is to break up the wood grain, natural wood grain texture that's there now. And just set those aside to dry. Now here what I'm doing is I put the lid back on the box, and I'm touching it up with purple on the outside in case I got any red accidentally on the outside. And I'm doing this before I start by dry brushing the exterior because it's harder to fix this later. And I'm also doing this because I don't want to see the red interior when the box is closed. So I'm pretty much just painting the outside and letting the paint fall on the lid where it needs to hide the red when the box is closed. And then I'm going to gently wedge it open with a razor blade. I'm just doing this because I don't want to touch these sides since I just painted them. but I don't want to leave the lid on there while it's drying because it could literally dry and glue itself shut. So here we're going to dry brush on with black. Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird to dry brush on with black, but it's a fun technique because it'll keep that purple on there, and the purple will sort of live in the bottommost crevices of the box, and it'll give it a sort of an alien look because it's the opposite of how texturing usually works. And I'm going to darken most of the box with this black. And once this is set on there, I'm going to add a very cool color that I have. It's this chromatic purple. I'm going to dry brush that on top of the black to give it a little bit of a purple shimmer and also to lighten up that black just a little bit. This is a really cool color. I bought this for my Undead Purple Worm. You can see a tutorial for that here on my site as well. It's just such a great color. I'm glad I found a use for it again. It gives a good shimmer to everything. It gives like this metallic shimmer, as you can see here. And it really accents the edges of everything. And it also softens that black and brings it back a little closer to purple. Now that we have our black and purple base, now we're going to do the highlights and accents in a green. So yeah, this is basically just an apple tart green that I put on there with a big old cruddy brush. And I'm putting most of it on the top, and then I'm going to have it sort of fall down the edges as if this green is sort of emanating from the eye. And once I got that green on there, I liked it, but I wanted to bring a shimmer to the green as well. So what I did was, while I still had green on my brush from the dry brushing of the green, I added some silver to the brush, which naturally mixed in with the green already on the brush. And that added some nice shimmer to the green layer on the box itself. So yeah, so now I got silver and the green on my brush, and I dry brushed that on. You can already see the silver shimmer being added to the green. And again, it adds a nice edge to everything and a nice shimmer. And I think we're pretty much there. Now it's time for one of the most fun parts for me, which is adding realistic water to this fleshy interior. This is such a great product. It's a little expensive. I think it's about 20 bucks a bottle as of me making this video, but I've had that same bottle of realistic water now for 5 or 6 years. So it really pays dividends, and you don't need a lot. And I'm rolling the box around just to sort of spread around the bottom. And for the rest of it, I'll just use a brush to kind of get it on the sides and on the top of the box itself. And just put that aside to dry. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the lid. Just going to add a light coating of it. Once they're dry, we can start cutting out the masking tape around the eyeball. Now obviously you want to do this very carefully. You can fix mistakes if you accidentally cut into the eyelid. It's a little bit more involved because there's so many layers of paint on there, but you can touch it up afterwards. Now here was my mistake. Now do you remember how I added those veins into the eyeball? I left ends of the thread that were not covered in the realistic water product. So what I think happened was when I peeled this tape up, it literally pulled on those loose threads and just peeled them up along with the tape, and I just didn't notice. But now I know for next time not to do that. And if you've got a piece that doesn't want to come off, you can gently use your blade to sort of wedge under it to get it started. Just be careful not to scratch the eye. And for the little bits of tape that are inevitably going to be stuck around the edges, you can also use a pair of tweezers to get them going. Just be careful and never pull straight up because you'll tear the eyelid. You want to pull straight out and across so you don't break the eyelid itself. And some of it will be a little tough to get out, but you'll work it out eventually. And I'm going to add a little bit more realistic water on the sides. Now again, I might not have had to do this if it wasn't for the fact that my little veins got pulled out, but I wanted to make sure that they looked nice and wet and smooth, so I added some more realistic water. And after this, I didn't get to videotape this, but I actually did put a little bit of paint in the corners of the eyes to sort of simulate whatever that is, the tear duct or whatever. And that's it. And then we have one Eyeaboxical dye box. So I hope you enjoyed it, and hope you learned a few things, and hope you enjoy the box. Till next time, thanks. Please like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos. As my thank you for your support, I've also put some free downloads for you at GameGearMaster.com, including a free PDF that lays out the details on the different Terraino building blocks. And I'll be posting more free stuff there, as well as game gear, D&D adventures, and other stuff you can buy to support these free videos. So thanks again.